Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome to another quick tank review. This time we're looking at the Tier 9 Russian heavy tank, the ST-1. We find the ST-1 leading on from the KV-4 down the Russian heavy line, and it is the predecessor to the IS-4, the Tier 10 Russian heavy tank. Now, what do you need to know about the ST-1 in a nutshell? It is a very heavily armored tank with a very punchy gun. It's not the fastest tank in the game, but that doesn't mean that it's sluggish. And it's able to weather a hell of a storm and use its fantastic 122mm to inflict large amounts of damage on its opponent. If that sounds like the kind of tank that you're interested in, stay tuned and I'll let you know everything that you need to know about this tank. And if not, stay tuned and I'll tell you exactly how you can take it out easily on the battlefield. So let's run over this tank's stats quickly. It has 1900 hit points. That is huge, which gives you a lot of leeway to be able to take hits and still remain in the game. Now the tank weighs just shy of 62 tons, which means that you should definitely not ram this unless you're in a very heavy tank. And that equally means that there is some possibility for you to ram tanks, such as medium tanks, which are maybe 40 tons. Now the engine power of this tank is okay. It's got 700 horsepower, which means that it is able to progress up to its top speed limit of 40 kilometers an hour along a hard flat surface. Of course, this rather excellent top speed limit of 40 kilometers an hour means that downhill this thing can pick up quite significant speed to be able to advance around the battlefield and take advantage of flanking maybe slower, heavier tanks. But don't let me confuse you, this is definitely a heavy tank and it is quite sluggish at times. Now the hull armor on this tank is absolutely fantastic. It's got 140mm at the front, 140 at the side, and 100 at the rear. The turret armor is equally thick with 250 at the front, 160 at the side, and 160 at the rear. Interestingly, the turret's cupola is quite angled as you see here, which means that this has to be one of the best turrets in the game. Interestingly as well, this tank has got 8 degrees of gun depression, which is the same as the E-75. So if you're thinking that most Russian tanks struggle to be able to take advantage of undulations, look no further. The ST-1 has a surprising amount of gun depression, which often allows it to go hull down and use its fantastic turret. I want to give you a well-rounded opinion of the armor of this tank, so I'm just going to be going into a What Tank armor viewer to be able to give you a bit more analysis. So here we are looking at an armor profile of the ST-1, and before I get a million questions about what program I'm using What Tank Viewer. Google is your friend, and I'm sure you can find a download link of this on the World of Tanks official forums. So as we can see, the frontal armor of this tank is very thick indeed. The lower plate is 160, and don't be fooled, the driver's hatch is also rather thick with 160. However, one thing of note is that as you can see here, the angle of the driver's hatch is rather flat, which means that if you're up close and personal with this tank, if they're very stationary, you can still go for the driver's hatch. We can see that the cupola on top of the tank is between the 160 and 200mm as well, meaning that if you're interested, you can take advantage of the commander's view hatch on top of the tank and shoot at it if you're in a rather tall tank in close quarters combat with the ST-1. As we can see, artillery has a lovely opportunity to smash the top of this tank, especially on top of the turret, so if you can land a long arcing shell onto the tank, it is likely to decimate it. However, this review is more about for the non-artillery players and how you're going to try and engage this tank. So as we can see, where the gun is mounted is very thick indeed, basically impenetrable unless you're firing very high penetration heat rounds. Also, the front of the turret armor is rather well angled if you're trying to engage the tank from the front, as can be seen here. However, if you do get an angle, then this is still quite a flat surface that you will still have to punch through 220mm, but you do have an okay kind of chance to go through, as long as it's flat. Now, interestingly, it looks like the sides of the front of the armor is 140mm. So if you turn this side on, you still have a chance to punch through it with quite a high caliber round. However, if you hit here from the front of the tank, that's not going to go in. Now, the lower plate of this tank we can see is 160, and it is rather flat. If the tank is not angling its armor, you will be able to just shoot its lower plate and penetrate it with most guns that this tank is going to meet. If we take the tracks away, we can see the hull armor of this tank, which is 140 at the side. That can be quite challenging to get through, and we can see that the side of the turret is 160. Now, the side of the turret is long and very flat, and this is one of the easiest places to penetrate the ST-1. And if you have the flank of the tank, then you should take advantage of this long, flat turret. And the turret traverse of this tank is rather slow, so it isn't going to be able to turn very quickly if you can get the jump on this tank. Equally, the back of the turret is flat, but you'd have to be a fool not to go for the hull armor at the back. What this means is that if you're using the ST-1, you want to angle it almost at 45 degrees and go forwards and backwards to avoid them from shooting your weak points. If you angle the tank at 45 degrees, it's going to be very, very, very hard for any enemy tank in the game to penetrate you reliably. As soon as you give them your lower plate, you're in a lot of trouble, and as soon as you give them the side of your turret, you're in a lot of trouble as well. Those are the two things that you want to avoid giving the enemy for free in the ST-1, and those are the two things that you want to go for if you're engaging one of these behemoths. However, don't think it'll come easily, as a skilled ST-1 driver will know the weaknesses of his tank and avoid giving them to you at all costs. So now we're back in the garage, let's take a look at the gun characteristics of this tank. It gets a fantastic 122mm that now does a whopping 440 alpha damage. This isn't the same as the IS-3, for example, that does 390, and also you can see that it has excellent penetration performance of 258mm. The only downside to this is a rather less than impressive rate of fire of 4.5 rounds a minute, fairly okay accuracy of 0.38, but a terrible aim time of 3.4, one of the biggest weaknesses on the ST-1. So what you basically need to know about this gun is that it's very punchy. If you hit the target, you will generally go in unless you're shooting a very, very thickly armored target. Interestingly, this rate of fire, when you compare it to the E75 gun, which I'm showing here, means that you do have 6% more DPM than the E75. As well as having the penetration advantage, but at an extreme disadvantage with your aim time. The heat rounds that this tank gets do pack quite a lot of punch with 340mm of penetration. However, against angled targets and also spaced armor, they're going to be worse than the APCR rounds that the E75 get, which have got 311mm of penetration. You guys might be asking, why are you comparing this tank to the E75? Well, honestly, that is the nearest comparison that you're ever going to get with the ST-1. And some of you will be very excited about that. Some of you might love the E75. And if you like the E75 playstyle, as long as you can adjust to some of the differences that you're going to have with the ST-1, you're still going to have an absolute monster of a time, guys. One thing to watch out for, as I did touch on earlier, is that the turret traverse of the speed is only 18 degrees a second. What that means is that if you're able to track this tank, you're very easily able to outmaneuver it. Medium tanks can run circles around these tanks if it can keep them tracked. One thing also that's interesting is that this tank does have 380 meters view range, which is less than the E75 at 400 meters. However, a quick comparison on Tank Compare shows that the camo rating of the ST-1 is significantly better than the E75, both when stationary, in motion, and when firing. So that's absolutely everything that you need to know about the ST-1. Let's take a look at how it performs in some gameplay. So here we go, we're looking at gameplay in the ST-1. We're playing on Severgosk, which was the new 8.7 map. This is an 8.7 replay, so I was still testing out this map really. We're going to speed the game up a little bit so we can get into position. I always like to change flanks on Severgosk. The ST-1 isn't the fastest of tanks. As you can see, I'll put it in 1x speed for you here just so you can gauge it. We're averaging about 30 along these undulations. And I still think that the most valuable place is trying to defend the opposite flank. So we have an IS-8 dead ahead. I'm going to speed up the gameplay a little bit again so we can get stuck straight in there. So here we go, E100. We track him trying to go for his lower plate. I missed his lower plate. I see that he's aiming at the other guy and he's fired his shell. I want to go get another shot on him. Doesn't look like it's going to happen though. Still, I feel fairly confident even against an E100. I check the guys behind me to see how much health they're on. I see that the E100 must have missed his shell. So I aim for his weak point on top of his turret. No luck though. And we take a rather meaty shell. Manages to penetrate us. That time, however, we're able to go through the E100. And we see that, yeah, that looks like a bit of an interesting shot. Straight through my mantle. Didn't sound like it was an heat shell from the IS-8 though. And the E100 gets taken out fairly aggressively. Again, looking at that shot that went in through my turret. Bit of a dodgy one. Don't know if it was heat, I missed the sizzle. Maybe I can watch the replay back when it's on YouTube and know for sure. But here we have the side of an E4. And just look at the lovely alpha damage that you can get from this 122mm cannon. 474 roll there. We managed to get the T110 E4 to miss us. We aim at his lower plate. Take him out of the game. That's all she wrote for that E4. So we bounce the IS-8 again. Not sure what he's firing at us. Fortunately, he hasn't been able to go through us yet. For the second time, I should say. So, God, look at the aggression of the enemy on the other flank, guys. Oh, look at that other flank. We are down 3 tanks. We were down 4 tanks until we just secured that kill. We're down 4 again. But now we're going to have the opportunity. Here we go. Fortunately, we can see that the SD1's long-range engagement skills are not that good. It has more than enough penetration to go through its targets, but its accuracy is lacking. Its shells also have horrific velocity. I decide I've got to secure my flank. Let's get rid of the C-75. He misses me. I spot the scumbag running, so I decide I'm going to prioritize him. But the C-75 wants to shoot me in the side again, so I'll put one into him. I'm trying to angle my armor, and as you can see, he was unable to penetrate us. We're able to brutalize him. We did 1,289 damage to that E-75. He was unable to penetrate me. So the game is starting to even up a little bit. I tell my team to defend the base while I go off after this Tier 10 artillery. I see that I'm getting shot in the side by a scout tank. However, he's really going to have to fire premium rounds at me if he really wants to challenge me. I'm kind of not bothered, so I'm just angling my turret a little bit so he doesn't really get a flush surface. I'm more worried about this object 261. He misses his shot. I don't miss mine. Have a quick look to see if anything's approaching me. Nope, we're fine. I just wait for my second shell. And that's all she wrote for the Tier 10 artillery. So, right now I have the decision either to go and cap or to go and defend. I tell the team to defend the base. And I start to work my way towards the cap circle by the looks of it. Just going to speed up the replay for a bit. It's very boring watching these very slow Russian heavies traverse over the terrain. But just to give you an idea of just how slow you are, this is in real speed now. So great, 59.16 ahead of me. Really low roll there. He shows us some awesome driving skills. This is the last place you want to be in front of an SD1's gun. So we secure him and then we find the T-95. I quickly angle my tank as well as I can. And now you're going to see just how useful it is to have high penetration rounds. We managed to go through the lower plate of the T-95. We also realize that he's using 120mm because of his rate of fire. I'm just angling here. This is the standard side scrape maneuver for the SD1. So you can see here, this is the right angling for this tank, and it's very hard for the enemy to penetrate you when you angle like this. I decide that I want to progress against the enemy. Going to aim again. This time we don't have a clear shot on his lower plate, so we're going to go for his cupola. That time he was able to penetrate me. Let's take a look, see where he hit. Yep, the lower plate. That is what you need to defend in the SD1. Your lower plate and your driver's slot. Your driver's slot, your driver's hatch. Fortunately, we ricochet off the top of the T-95. Our driver is dead. Oh God, this is a big shot now. Okay, man. Alright, well it's on now, isn't it, sir? I wait for him to come through. And he gives me his lower plate. And he's out. GG. So wow, 5,600 damage. I'm not going to show you the post-game stats right now. I will go through them at the end. I just want to show you a couple more replays, guys, which I want to showcase really why I think the SD1 is such a powerhouse. Okay, so here we go. We're playing on Lakeville on the new encounter mode. I have decided to play my SD1 very aggressively. I want to showcase to you guys now just how good the armor is on the SD1 and what you can do with the tank with some aggressive play. We've We've basically YOLO'd straight down the middle, trying to get into this location. Fortunately, we haven't been shot in the side, because the enemies generally now decide to go aggressively around the far northeast of the map to be able to get into the town safely. So, without further ado, let's continue with our SD1. So here we go. Tier 9 medium tank. What are you going to do, sir? We go forwards and backwards. He tries to aim at our cupola on top of our tank. But as we can clearly see, the cupola on the SD1 is actually quite slanted. It's not like many cupolas where it's not slanted. And that allows us to actually pull off some bounces when people try and aim for your supposed weak points on top of your tank. So my team are clearly taking the town. This was a 53%er, so it's not like a smash and grab game. I have to be fairly careful still. We're just looking for sniping shots here, and we have one on the T-29. Oh, that's gotta hurt. I do like the alpha damage. This 440 average alpha damage, it does feel rather meaty when you hit these tanks. Especially when you shoot tier 7 targets. And it's really hard to believe for me that an ST1 can actually meet tier 7 tanks. It's just not balanced. It's like an E75 meeting tier 7 tanks. It's just not fair for them. It really isn't. But you know what? I'm not complaining. I want to be aggressive here. I underestimated the amount of tanks that will be around this corner, as you guys will see very soon. Oh my god, there's loads of tanks. Okay. We put one into the lower plate there of the Ferdinand. We bounce another one. Still haven't been penetrated yet. I pull back because I want to engage the IS-3 a little bit. Had no shot on him. And what we see now is that basically my team have completely overwhelmed the town because the enemies have been camping in their base. I don't have that long left to work. I want to kind of test my tank a little bit and get a bit of damage done before the game runs out. And there you go, a few more bounces. We're bouncing from multiple angles, angling our armor. So we bounce the IS-3. I know he'll take about 10 seconds to reload, so I have enough time to get a shot into someone else. Kill the Tiger P, and oh god, we've got a lot of enemies shooting at us now. Here we go, okay, ouch, ouch, ouch. They finally hit the lower plate of the tank, killed my driver, but somehow we're still bouncing and we're pulling back. We bounced the IS-3 who's attacking us on the move. We're constantly angling our armor. I'm trying to angle for the IS-3, both of them. And we're luring them into a firing zone for our team. Make the kill there. There's only 17 seconds left in the game because my team are capping, and you know what? I just like to fight. Let's just have a fight here. I'm just testing the tank out at the moment. The Ferdinand pens our lower plate. We pen his lower plate. We take a look there. Let's just pause that for a second. You guys can clearly see the weak points of the ST1 is the lower plate. I haven't really been doing excellent angling, if I've been very honest with you. This is not angled enough. This is not angled enough. You need it to be more like this. This would be the correct angle here. So what really I take from this situation is that trying to fight around corners like this is fairly tricky. It's not like a hard corner. And I was also very worried. If I angled like this, then I gave my lower plate to the IS-3 who was to my side. So really, it was kind of in a lost situation here, really, because I'm getting engaged from multiple angles, but I know the game is won anyway. So really, I'm just playing to test the tank, get some damage done, and also just try out the SD1, which is still a very, very new tank for me. But yeah, guys, that really showcases hide your lower plate. It's far better to try and get them to hit some of your angled side armor, and also some of the spaced armor that's around here, and also the chance that they can take your track off. So really, this is about a 40 to 45 degree tank, and if you don't angle it, you're going to get punished. So the game's nearly over. I want to get a kill on the Ferdinand. I side scrape around, try and get the kill on the Ferdinand. I bounce him, and I go, okay, Mr. Ferdinand, I've got you. And oh no, the sneaky IS-3 got me in the side. But guys, you won't be able to see. Actually, maybe I can just quickly show you. Here were the details of this game. I appreciate this is a little bit small and you guys won't be able to see it, but I'd just like to highlight that we took 21 hits there. And in that very, very short game, we took over 7,000 potential damage. Here we go, 7,440 potential damage received. That really showcases just how brutal the ST1's armor is. And taking that much damage in that short of a time, and still not dying really until we were too aggressive at the end, Really showcases just how strong the armor is on the ST1. Anyway, I've got some more gameplay to show you. Here we go. Okay guys, I'm playing the ST1 this time on the hill on Malinovka. This is one of the tanks that I would take up the hill on Malinovka every time and expect to have a huge game in it. Why? Because the tank has got great armor, great gun depression, great penetration, and fairly nice punchy alpha. That means that fighting on these kind of hill lines is the perfect opportunity for this tank. Let's take a look at how it performs in this 53% matchup. So here we can clearly see the IS-7. We try and aim at his angled armor there. You'll know that basically the headlights on the IS-7 are the weak point when he's angling like this. However, now he's angled his armor slightly, I can aim at his lower plate. We brutalize his lower plate, and he doesn't even want to aim at us. We're aiming again, going for his lower plate. Beautiful shot. Nice high roll as well there. 510 alpha damage, that's a huge roll for this gun. Again, we've got his lower plate. Fortunately, we donk the shell out into the ground there, and it looks like I raged a little bit because my mouse has stopped moving. Oh, it's funny watching these replays back. Okay, so we've got another shot on his lower plate. That's one of the fantastic things about this gun. Look at the gun depression that we have. We don't have to expose much of our tank. And with the 258mm of penetration that we have, we've been able to penetrate the IS-7 every time that we've hit its lower plate. So we've done 1,700 damage to that guy. He can't be very happy at the moment. And we're not done yet. We're going to go for another shot on him, try and get the finishing shot. Unfortunately, the gunner lobs that one fairly high, and we hit his turret instead of hitting his headlight weak points. So the enemy IS-7 has been caught in a really dodgy location. We put a nice hit into him as well. It's really nice having this high penetration 122mm on the ST1. Really allows you to make your shots count. Again, the gunner fires a little too high, hits the turret, and that's never going to be a penetrating shot on the IS-7. So here we go, we're aiming at his headlights again. Decide that it's not going to be a good opportunity, aim at the easier target. And unfortunately, we low roll there, 373. So that's a huge difference in damage between 373 and the 510 that we rolled earlier. So again, we're aiming at the IS-8. Putting a clean shot into him. Now we're over 3,000 damage. We've only been penetrated once. The enemy simply can't do anything because we are hull down and we've got the much better cannon. And this is really what I wanted to showcase for you guys. The kind of positions. The ST1 is an absolute behemoth if you can get it hull down. And your armor is enough to just take hits. Just take the hits. Bouncing a shell there on the M103, unfortunately. Just going to speed the game up a little bit. Let's see how it finishes off. Now this is a good example of good ST1 work. Get my armor angled, and you can go hull down over enemy tanks. When you're hull down in an ST1, there's barely anything that will penetrate you frontally. He's going to have to fire premium rounds at me if he wants to really go in, or he's going to have to get really lucky and snipe my cupola. And my cupola is slanted on this tank, which makes it very tricky to penetrate frontally. The main weakness of the ST1, as I highlighted in the garage, is the flat side armor of the turret, which means that any tank there could really absolutely nail me in the side. Still, let's finish off that tier tank like we started. And that's really all I wanted to show you with the ST1 in this matchup. This game simply becomes finish them off as quickly as possible. And that's all she wrote for the enemy team. Anyway, guys, that was all the gameplay I really wanted to show you in the ST1. I feel like I've highlighted all of the key strengths of this tank. let's take a look at the post-game stats of the first game that I showed you on Severgosk. Here are our post-game stats. We can see that we managed to pick up the Mastery Badge and got 111,000 credits, although that looks like it's for an event, because with our premium account we only got 75,000. We got Steel Wall, and we got a Sniper Medal, which is quite impressive in an SD1, considering what its accuracy is. We did 5,600 damage and got 1,450 experience. Non-premium, non-double. We hit 18 out of 19, as 16 out of those 18 penetrated. It was a rather large game. We took 16 hits and only 7 of them penetrated. It was only really when the T95 at the end got my lower plate that they really started going in. And what can I say? Just a really standard kind of game in the SD1. It's a bit of a bread and butter tank. It's a tank that I'm getting one of my highest average experiences with in any tank in the game at the moment. I can't recommend this tank enough. It's basically like a Russian E75. It does play slightly differently, but if you can play the E75 well, there's no reason why you can't perform well in the SD1. I liked this tank so much from some of the replays that I saw that I just had to buy it. I already had the IS-4 from back when the IS-4 used to be the tier 9 heavy tank. I grinded my way through the KV4 and I bought the SD1 and I elited it just so I could play this tank. I think this is definitely one of the tanks that you want to have in your garage as one of your keeper tanks. I think it's totally worth it, but one thing that I will say is that with the changes that just happened to the E75, that's lowering its engine power and increasing its traverse speed, that really I don't see that much difference between the SD1 and the E75 now. Previously the E75 was a lot slower downhill, it had worse traverse speed, but it had much better engine power, which allowed it to just plow uphill, unlike what the SD1 can. Now the E75 has the same top speed, roughly the same traverse speed, and it's got similar horsepower to ton ratio. Basically, this means that the SD1 and the E75 are now a lot more similar than they used to be. What this makes me think is that if you've already got the E75, would I recommend you getting the SD1? I wouldn't say prioritize it. All I would say is that if you like the E75, you will like the SD1 because the gameplay is very similar, and especially now in 8.8, the gameplay is very similar. I think tier for tier, this has to be one of the better tanks in the game, and I'd probably rather play the SD1 than the IS-4, considering the kind of matchups this tank gets. It can meet those tier 7 tanks, and when it does meet those tier 7 tanks, there's basically nothing that they can do against it. If you guys want to see more exciting gameplay in the SD1, then check out the first ever replay competition that I did, the first entry. I think it was Kiviak Otako showcased some excellent side scraping and a huge damage game in the SD1. I've only played 30 or so games in this tank. I'm still trying to get to grips with it, but I know it is an absolute performer and I give it my full recommendation. So guys, if this has been helpful to you, please consider rating the video down below. I'd really appreciate it. And tell me what you think about the SD1. And I'm very interested to know what you guys think about now the differences between the E75 and the SD1. Do you think that the 8.8 German changes mean that really they're kind of just clone tanks? And do you think that's a good thing for the game? I personally want to see as much variety between the trees as possible, and I feel now that the Conqueror and the M103 are very similar, and the SD1 and the E75 are very similar, although there are differences between the tank. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. Think about checking out some of my other QuickTank reviews if you want to be well informed on all the best and some of the worst tanks in the game. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.